Thank you.
Big bad builders, time running out as ever. Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. As ever, this is Cladding Matters, where we talk about all things to do with cladding, specifically the effects that the lack of action from the big bad builders had, and perhaps even the remunerations that led from that. But today, I'm going to pass straight over to Hamish McClay, our Lord and Master, who will get us underway.
Well, we're almost speaking today about remediation or regeneration. There's an awful lot of areas, London particularly, where regeneration is taking place, a number of larger cities, because in an effort to sort of keep pace with this 1.5 million properties that we're trying to build. And as we repeatedly say, if you build 1.5 million, if we're currently 6.5 million short, I mean, the 1.5 million by the time we built them is we're going to be at 10 million short, I imagine, particularly the way that the way things are going. However, the important thing is, can we actually build new, regenerate, and remediate and do all of these things? We had 2 companies just recently speak of massive, great losses as a consequence of what they hadn't accounted for with cladding. And unfortunately, people have brought this thing upon themselves. If you build crap, if you excuse the expression, basically that's what you end up with. And unfortunately, we've taken on board, we've trusted people to be saying that they're building something of consequence. We see this massive, great building going up. It's got cladding. Now, it's called cladding for very good reason, because it covers up the mess that's underneath it. In far too many cases. And what we've actually sort of seen is a scenario where this needs so many properties need remediating. And then, of course, as we find out, they're going to need remediating again in about sort of 20 years. But can we actually build? Have we got enough people out there to actually sort of build and remediate? But more important than that, when we speak about remediation, what standard are we remediating to? And are we leaving people actually in a situation where the government want to tell us that everybody deserves to have a home, somewhere that they can call home? And they keep on saying this, yet somehow or other, with what their intent, with their remediation ideas, I don't think it's going exactly that nice, cozy home that they're trying to imply. And we've got somebody today. Deep hasn't actually joined us on our podcast before, but she has a story to tell. I mean, we're pretty well stuck with Steve in Royal Artillery Quay. Many of people know.
Let's not call it stuck with Steve. I would say we're supporting Steve in his ongoing fight against injustice.
Not just Royal Artillery Quays. We're looking further afield, but Deepa can actually sort of tell us. We did have a guest. Dom actually was on board, and he told us about King's Tower, where all the remediation related. They've got it started, and they've sort of tidied up 4 balconies, for heaven's sake. I mean, how the hell has that started, remediation? Anyway, we better pass on over to Deepa, because she's got some serious tales to tell us of where she feels that the remediation currently is.
Welcome, Deepa, please. We would love to hear your story.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Gareth, Hamish, and Steve for having me on today. Well, I'll start at the beginning. I have been a shared owner since 2010, and the property that I bought was a 2-bedroom apartment in central London. So it was, very, very popular area, very, very densely populated as well. And I bought from a housing association. When I initially purchased it, it was, the building was brand new and I was watching it going up. So I was the first person living in my apartment, and I am still, 15 years later, the only person living in that apartment. Though the other side of that is that I'm not currently living there. I'm currently based in Leicester. So there's a whole gap to fill in here. However, I was generally, okay with the property until about 2017 when Grenfell happened. The fire did spark a little bit of panic in me personally, but actually a lot of those worries were put to bed when within a few weeks the housing association had actually put up some scaffolding and were investigating the cladding. But a few weeks later we then received some correspondence to say, well, actually this is very similar cladding, it's flammable, and we will be rectifying this. And I do believe that we were one of the first estates or first block to have this sort of work done, because the scaffolding was up pretty much immediately and there were contractors on site ripping the cladding off. So I suppose for that I was quite grateful. The issue was the conditions under which this was all occurring. So when we were first told that this work had to be done, we weren't told anything else about, what it was going to cost, who was going to be paying for it, how long it was going to take, how the conditions that we were living in were going to be mitigated and managed, what was going to be done in the meantime, any compensation that was provided. There was very little communication. So, one of the first things I want to raise is that communication at that time was minimal, and it only happened if we as residents would make phone calls, lots and lots of phone calls to the help desks. But there were a lot of people who at the time also didn't know what the schedule of works were. I ended up speaking to the contractors on site quite a lot and, trying to work out what it was that was going on. And then through them, we ended up being able to, have a couple of meetings so that all the residents could understand the work to be going on, what that meant for them, how long it was going to be. That was one of the first things that I think was, could really have been addressed earlier. Then we also had an installment of a waking watch. So that was over a period of time whilst they were, still putting up the materials to keep the building safe. But actually the waking watch were there on the top of our 7-story building and would sit in the stairwell. And I didn't really see them doing very much except playing games on their phones with the headphones in. So if there were a fire or if there were any problems, they wouldn't know. And they, as how effective is a waking watch when you can't hear anything?
It's a sleeping watch.
The other thing is that I felt it was quite,
Isn't it?
yeah. I felt that there was quite a bit of intrusion. So, you're constantly seeing people on site, and it would start very early morning till very late in the evening. So, you couldn't get any privacy. And I'm up on the 6th floor, and I'm not used to having people looking through my windows. But, for a number of months, I had people walking around the building looking through my windows. It felt intrusive because I just had a baby, and we were, I was nursing, and then I had a younger child running around as well. So I wanted to just have some privacy, which meant a lot of the time our blinds were closed, but also we couldn't open the windows because there was noise. I'll come back to the noise in a moment. One of the other things about the windows was that when you opened it, you would just get a lot of dust in. So, as you're pulling the cladding off, you then have fine particles of aluminium dust. And it just sits on your balcony, it sits on the decking, it sits on your windowsills, and every day I would have to sweep it away. I had asked very politely if the workmen would do this for me. And, they're kind enough to say, yes, we'll take care of it. But in actual fact, it didn't get done. So I ended up going out onto the scaffolding myself, even though we were asked not to, and doing that myself. The temperature itself, because it was in the middle of summer.
Deepa, how far up are you?
I'm on the 6th floor. So
you were going out onto the scaffolding onto the 6th floor?
I was going out onto the balcony.
Right.
Onto the balcony. And
clearing away the mess.
Then opening my windows where there was no balcony, and then just trying to sweep the clearing away the mess. Yeah.
I've got you. Sorry. I had this.
So
I had this image of you
thing.
hanging from 6 floors up. Sorry about
that. No. The temperature itself during the summer periods, it was very, very hot. And it generally is quite warm in apartments in central London due to, how how densely populated the city is. But it was even more excruciatingly hot because you couldn't open your windows to get any fresh air, and it was just quite difficult. But in the winter time, because we were sat with a naked building, it was virtually naked. There was no cladding put back on. It just had, I'm not sure what you call it, the membrane that goes over the top to protect it from weathering. It didn't really protect you very much because there was a lot of cold. It was a particularly harsh winter that year. And I remember it being colder than usual. I remember even with all the windows shut, with all the blinds closed, all the curtains closed, it was extra cold. So our heating was on a lot more. And it wasn't something that the Housing Association had thought, let's compensate the residents for that because they've got to, live in this level of discomfort. It was also dark. That's not nice to be around either when it's already dark in the winter time.
Quite.
I would say that, I alluded to some of the noise, but actually the noise that was something that bothered me more, where you had contractors who are on site and not being sensitive and considerate to who's living in those flats. So, on very often I'd have contractors who'd walk past my balcony and be swearing, or you've got lewd jokes or inappropriate language, but that's not really appropriate. There were often smoking, so I'd find butts of cigarettes just laying around, Coke cans left, bits of rubbish, and it was just inappropriate. I think the inappropriate language bothered me that much that after a few weeks I had to speak to the main contractors and also the housing association and just let them know that I don't know what code of conduct your contractors sign up to, but could you please have a word with them? I have young children running around and it's not the kind of thing I want them to be hearing.
Right.
So yeah, that was another area that I thought they'd benefit from knowing about for future remediations. And because I'm up on the 6th floor, bearing in mind I've got 2 children, which means I have a double buggy, I would have to go up and down in the main lift. There was only one, which was the firefighting lift as well, but they were using it to cart some of their materials up and down. So often it didn't work. And I would then have to fold the buggy up, take the children downstairs, take the buggy downstairs on the stairs, and then come back with them and do the same thing. Say, for example, I went shopping, so I'd have to take the children back upstairs, then take the buggy back upstairs, and then come down and get all the shopping bags. So up and down the 6 flights of stairs. I don't mind a bit of exercise, but what I did mind was that, they would just stand around the stairwells and just watch while you do that, rather than saying, oh, let me give you a hand. And this got quite annoying to the point where I called the housing association and said, look, I'm doing this. And what did they say to me? Oh, yeah, we sympathise with you, but, it won't be for much longer. And then one very kind, sarcastic person suggested that perhaps I should ask them to help me. I shouldn't have to, should I?
I don't know whether you should or you shouldn't, but it would be down to the probability that you'd already asked at this stage anyway. So the fact that they asked you to suggest that seems a bit pointless because you probably would have done it anyway. No, common decency would have dictated you'd have thought they would help.
What this highlights to me is that they didn't do their due diligence beforehand. So when they were thinking about who is in the property at the moment, who do you have that's vulnerable, that may need that kind of assistance, I'm not sure whether they really took that into consideration.
Almost definitely not. So how does this affected you from a point of view of emotion? Deeper.
Well, I spent a number of months very angry all of the time, which it's not a great state to be in. No. It was stressful because of the noise and you're losing sleep. I'm panicked anyway because I'm thinking, well, what's going to happen once this is fixed? Are they then going to find out that there's something else and then we'll have to do more work? Who's paid for this? And up and sell and move on. but I wasn't really able to do so. I mean, I can talk to you about what happened post all of the remediations, because it didn't stop there.
Yeah, that's important, Dee, because I think what we need to understand is what's happening now, because you're meant to be through it now and everything's fine, but we know it isn't.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about where you are now.
So where have they left you now?
Yeah.
And what happened after the point when it was supposed to have completed everything?
So remediation was completed, let's say around mid 2018 or mid 2019. I can't remember exactly. And I was elated. Scaffolding came down and we thought, oh, this is fantastic. I can now put the flat on the market because I've had enough of this. I attempted to, and was swiftly told that you can put it on the market if you'd like to. And the Housing Association were very laid back about this. You can pay all the money and put it on the market if you'd like to. However, just be aware that there is a new certificate requirement called an EWS, which is, it's demonstrating the safety of the external wall. And I didn't know anything about it, so I had to do quite a bit of research, find out what this was all about. But basically, it requires an engineer who understands and has the correct indemnity insurance to come out, assess your building, assess the cladding, and then report on its safety. So I thought, okay, well, let's wait for that to get done. However, then as I looked into it more, I realized that there are a handful of engineers across the country who are willing to do that kind of work. And then you've got a number, thousands and thousands of blocks across the country that need to have this assessment done. And I waited for years to get this certificate. I didn't receive it until 2023. That's about 2 years ago now. And this work was done in 2018. So you're talking 5 years. I waited 5 years for this certificate. But in the meantime, I had, explained to the Housing Association, look, by that time I'd had 3 children. I then said, look, this is not appropriate. This place is not fit for purpose for us any longer. I cannot afford it. It's 2 bedrooms. It's too small for me and my growing family. We need to move on. What can you do for us? Can you please buy this property back from us? Or can we do something? We ended up getting I guess, an exceptional circumstance ability to move out of there, but they would not buy the property back. So I managed to get some permission to be able to sublet. I thought, this is great. However, I spent about 6 to 8 months jumping through a number of hoops, getting the council to agree to it, getting my mortgage lender to agree to it, jumping through hoops for the Housing Association, and, getting all sorts of certificates and things in place. And by that time, I had moved to Leicester. So in about 2021, I believe, I had been able to shift to Leicester with the family. We'd set ourselves up in a rented home. So I was paying rent in Leicester for me and my children. And then I was also covering the costs of this flat here that was still set in London. I was paying the service charges, all of the utility bills, and so on, plus the mortgage, and then the rental portion of that shared ownership element. By the time I had managed to get it rented out and managed to find some tenants in there, it was just about enough to cover the costs, but it hadn't covered anything in the preamble to that. And when I received the EWS certificate in 2023, I pretty much put it straight back onto the market. And, I jumped through all the hoops I had to, because I was desperate by this point to end this saga. And it took about 6 months for me through viewings, it took about 6 months for me to have an offer, which I was elated about, obviously. It was actually about this exact time last year. So I had an offer come through, I'd accepted it. I had started going through the process, and by about December, we were almost at completion point. In January of this year, there was news that had come about that the EWS certificate that I had, or that the Housing Association had obtained for this building, was no longer valid because it was signed by somebody who was then expelled from the regulator.
Yeah, we know something about this. That's
where I was. The buyer
complete nonsense.
Happening.
Yeah.
So I couldn't complete. The flat is empty. I have all the bills for it, and it could be another 5 years for me to another inspection for an EWS certificate to be provided. So I'm currently paying for a flat that nobody's living in, as well as paying rent in Leicester. And I'm now at the end of my tether, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Steve,
Well,
thoughts?
it's an appalling situation, and I mean, what Deepa hasn't said is she's been an amazing support and friend throughout the 5 years we've been fighting, and has stood behind the Earl of Lytton scheme, and also founded the Building Safety Crisis Limited, where a lot of work was done to basically try and get the government to see these issues. And I mean, to wait for 5 years for an EWS1 form to say you can sell your property, only to find out it's been done by a fire engineer of disrepute, and then have it all fall through after waiting that long. That shows the shocking situation going on around the country, and also throw in shared ownership as well. Deepa isn't in charge of everything, doesn't own everything, and yet she's 100% liable for all these bills and service charges and everything. And I think where we are and where we've always been is we need a proper overhaul of where all these vested interests are, and that's these fire engineers. They're being lent on to push through EWS1s and FREWs. There's no funding for 1.7 million people. They're excluded completely. You've got shared owners that are paying 100% for everything. Well, why can't the freeholder pay for some of the service charge if they're benefiting from it? Why can't they take on some of these charges and liabilities? And maybe if they did, they might get some of the stuff done quicker. I think where Deepa's story is particularly troubling is just showing the length of time. Not only is it a dodgy EWS1 in the end, but she had to wait such a long time for it. And there should be maximum timelines for these forms. It shouldn't be possible to wait 5 years. And this all comes back to a proper comprehensive solution, which is what Deepa and a lot of others, we've actually checked the petition, and we've now got over 64,000 backers of the Earl of Lytton's building safety scheme now, which is amazing. It's been going out. It's gone up from 50,000 to 64,000 something, and we still need the solution 5 years on. And we need to get rid of PAS, where we're getting the water down standard, which invalidates EWS1s when they find out there's a load of stuff left on. I'm pleased to say that we'll be doing some announcements later on around September, where we actually should be able to say some good news on some of the PAS stuff. I'm trying to get the Liberal Democrats to back some motion changes.
That's quite exciting. Exciting.
No, I think so. And it's basically, bringing PAS in line with the Building Safety Act to deal with building risks as identified and defined by that act, and also making sure that remediations are done to the building risk standard, rather than this sort of watered down PAS standard. So the first step is getting the Liberal Democrats to agree that in conference, the amendments I've written, and then secondly, and we've got some good support coming in internally in the Liberal Democrats. Secondly, I had a meeting with Kevin Hollinrake, so I'll be renewing that meeting to try and get him to support it, and then we need to sock it to Labour and make sure that they see that this is required. So our work continues, as it always will do, until this is law. And I guess, Deepa, I guess for you are you having a new EWS1 done now? Surely it doesn't just stop there, your story.
It doesn't stop there. No, the Housing Association have confirmed that they have put it on the agenda to be done, but they haven't got a schedule for when that inspection is to be carried out. I've also been told it could be about 12 weeks once the inspection is carried out by, for the report to be signed off and approved. So, at best, that could put me to the end of this year, but actually, I don't know. And I've had varying correspondences with the Housing Association. So one had returned to me and said that you'll have something by the end of summer 2025. And forgive me, but I believe the end of summer, in my view, is by about the end of September. I don't see anything coming through my door anytime soon. But if anything is to go by the last standards, I think it could be years before while I'm waiting. And I have, throughout this entire time, ever since Grenfell, I have been asking for a buyback. Exceptional circumstances, you cannot make a person wait this long. They can't move on with their lives. The problem is, I can't legally take out another mortgage. So, if I'm fortunate enough to be able to, put down roots here in Leicester, which is what I would love to do, I can't take out a mortgage here because I'm legally bound by the covenants of the shared ownership terms and conditions. So I'm stuck. I have to continue renting and I have to wait until this flat is sold. So in the housing association's view, if this property, in their view, is seen as safe, and they do believe it is safe, I do believe it's safe. I think it's more just the certification that's required around it. Those assurances, if they believe it is safe, why can't they just buy it back from me and put it into their social housing stock? Because God knows there's a glut of social housing right now. And my flat, being sat empty for this long, it's 2 bedrooms. A whole family could
It's an
live
utter waste. It's an utter waste. In fact, we talk often about first-time buyers struggling to find places to buy or to rent, and there's an ideal example of where it could have been done if only they'd sorted out got their ducks in a row. Hamish, we've run a bit long.
Either if they get an EWS, then I can sell up and move on, or they just buy it back from me. Those are the 2 options in my view, and I think that it works better for the housing association to buy it back because it goes back into their stock and they can make good use of it. But at the moment, they're sitting and enjoying the fact that all the risk sits with me. I'm covering all the bills, I pay for everything, I take on all the risk, and they take on nothing. Their balance sheet is strong enough that they could cover the cost of it. And I believe they just don't want to start doing this because it may set a precedent. However, I think it's past that now. I've been waiting for this long. We're 2025, and I've been waiting since 2018.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Hamish, would you care to finish this home, please?
We have taken a little bit longer. I do hope, Deepa, we can actually get you on again sometime and we can speak about some of this. But the whole object of what we're doing here is to create an awareness to people out there of the difficulties that people have been having forced upon them as a consequence of decisions not being made. And to come back to the original question, can we afford remediation or building new properties? Are we going to achieve both we've been given ludicrous efforts or ludicrous suggestions? Everything to do with cladding will be resolved by, was it 2027?
29.
You look at the challenges that Deep has been through. What chance do we have of them? Bearing in mind, we had Matt on a couple of weeks ago telling us there are millions of properties out there that haven't even been found yet, that they haven't even taken the cladding off, they haven't even inspected to see the state underneath. So at that particular sort of point, thanks indeed, Deepa, for, I mean, that is really pretty sordid stuff that the housing, the housing association aren't helping, the local authority aren't helping. In fact, nobody is helping.
Well, this is a sorry state of affairs, and I wish you a quick resolution to this maelstrom of madness that you're within, Deepa. And Steve, I wish more power to your elbow. Thank you once again, Deepa, for taking the time out of your day to be with us from the Building Safety Crisis. Steve Day, thank you from Building Safety Scheme.org, stuck in Royal Artillery Keys, and of course Hamish McClay of Search Convey, whose brainchild putting together these channels is. And from me to the rest of you, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, and please try and look after your mental health in these times of crisis. Until next week, bye-bye.
There's a out some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll polish you the moon, but their work